Hey everybody, Dave Whitmarsh, Whitmarsh Consulting Group, owner of Best Practice in HR. Picking up a little interview podcast here with Steve Rothberg. So I don't think I've actually ever met you before, Steve.
In
I'm
real
sure
life.
we've passed each other many times, and I can certainly tell you that I 100% enjoy your sense of humor because we're on a number of Facebook groups and a friend on Facebook, and your comments are excellent and brilliant. And I have a feeling that at times you get governed by your wife like I do.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
the banter back and forth from us is great. And I definitely think that dad jokes describe most of the humor that you and I have.
yeah, totally. And just recently, I also noticed that you may be a Canadian, but not living in Canada anymore.
Correct, A. Yeah, I grew up in Winnipeg and went to the University of Manitoba for undergrad and then moved here to Minneapolis for grad school. And I've lived here ever since. So I've lived most of my life in the US, but I'm a dual citizen now.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So that gives you some perks. So depending on who
Yeah,
wins the election, you can just like in either country, you can pick your poison and go wherever you want.
I was going to say something like it allows me to be upset about the politicians in two countries rather than just
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Or uninformed on both, right? Depending on how you look at it. Yeah. And so what did you go to school for?
So University of Minnesota, I went to law school, graduated, passed the bar, and worked for a year as a lawyer for in the court system in Minnesota. And then I got out of law. One of my standard jokes is I got out of law so that I could enjoy my life. I started the business that College Recruiter grew out of in 1991, but we weren't really in the employment space until the mid 90s.
Interesting. So how how do you how do you make that jump from being a lawyer into recruiting? Help me out with
Yeah,
that.
so yeah, it's so the sort of the earliest origins, it was 1988. I was in my fourth year, or as Americans would say, their senior year, at the University of Manitoba in undergraduate business program. And I was in a small business marketing class in which was just basically the whole class was writing a business plan. And
Mm.
we were supposed to go to a local small business, basically say to the owner, there are three, four, five of us in the group. If you kind of open up your financials to us, talk about your product, services, whatever, we'll write a business plan for you. It'll all be confidential, and then you can use it or not use it. Choice is yours. One of my closest friends actually had a micro business, and we did it for his. And his micro business was to publish calendars and coupon books that he gave for free to the student union at the University of Manitoba. And it in turn gave those for free to the students. That Christmas, I was on vacation, the Christmas of '87. I was on vacation in Phoenix, and I had applied to law schools. I've been accepted at a couple of them or a few of them, and one of them was Arizona State University, which is in suburban Phoenix in Tempe. And so I went to the campus to kind of have a look around. And when I got on campus, I was handed a map of the ASU campus with advertising around the borders. So I thought,
Mm.
hey, this is perfect for my friend because he's doing stuff that's sort of like this already. Brought it back to him. He thought it was the stupidest idea in the world. I was looking for something to do that coming summer, the summer of '88, in between undergrad and grad school. And so I asked him, hey, would you mind if I did this? And he's like, knock yourself out. So I did it. It was great. I made way more money than if I had just had a regular summer job, and then
Mm.
basically handed over the business to a couple of friends of mine when I came here for law school. And one of them still operates the business to this day. If there are any Winnipeggers that are listening to this, they'll know it by the product, the Show and Save card.
Oh, very cool.
And so, yeah, so then after law school, I was practicing. He called me up. It's like, hey, do you want to come back into the business? I can run like the American arm, he can run the Canadian arm or something like that. We just couldn't make the numbers work, but it got my mental juices flowing. And it was just like, you know what? That's what really inspires me. Law's great and intellectually interesting, but my first love was always small business. So I got out of law faster than I thought I would, and got the business started up here
Well, law degree is never a bad thing to have.
for
And
sure. Any
yeah,
education.
and being Canadian and even considering going to school at like ASU is probably a bad idea because you'd just be a crispy piece of bacon left on the sidewalk, right? The sun and Manitoba don't go well together. Huh?
there's there's lots of sun when it's minus 40.
No, true. Yeah. Yeah. And so what year did you actually start College Recruiter then?
So the business out of which it grew, I started in the fall of 1991. So I was kind of in the middle of that job as a lawyer. I was a judicial law clerk. So basically, my job was to advise, do research, and advise a couple of judges on, it might be an evidentiary issue, a sentencing issue. It was usually stuff that would take hours or days to research and to apply to the matter that was before us, typically a court case. And the judges just don't have time for that. So I worked for a couple of different judges during that year, and one of them was just absolutely freaking brilliant, and just like a fantastic judge. And the other one was a good judge, but kind of lazy, wouldn't
Mm,
do any research at all, and just sort of let the stuff come at him. And so that judge, I had a lot more responsibility. But I got the business started part-time. So I was working, 40, 50 hours a week as a law clerk, and then evenings and weekends getting the business started. So that by the time that year was up, that I was a law clerk, I already had in place some of the contracts and stuff that I would need for the business to get started. The first product that I had in the summer of 92 was a campus map of the University of Minnesota. And then I added other campus maps and stuff that were kind of similar. In 94, I wanted to diversify. And so rather than publishing more campus maps, which was highly seasonal, I decided to focus on the campuses that I was already doing business at. And rather than coming out with a product that would hit freshmen or first year students that would sort of cannibalize my sales, I
mm,
decided, it would make more sense to have a product that hits the seniors, the graduating students. Um, and what they need more than anything else are jobs. So I came up with an employment magazine that became called College Recruiter.
mm,
And then in 1996, basically this thing called the internet came along. And it was right when Netscape had just gone public. Yahoo was just starting. Google was still a couple of years away. So it was really, really early. At the time, there were maybe 200 job boards globally. Um, Now, by some estimations, there are 150,000.
mm. Yeah, I think the internet's going to stick around too. So it
It's,
appears.
yeah, David, I'm starting to think it's not a fad.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And of course, Homer Simpson, right? He did say, "Ooh, look, the internet's on computers now," right? So
What will they think of next?
yeah. So when you built this, like, what was it? Almost like a forum sort of setup? Like
Yeah,
how?
yeah. So we're now on version 8 of the website, and the way that we kind of number that is like where we've basically rebuilt the site from the ground up, the 8th major versions, which sounds like a lot, but over a few decades, it's really not. Typically,
Okay.
websites get completely rebuilt every 3, 4, 5 years. Um, the very first version of the site, we had a high school kid who was working for us. And he was the one who was talking to us about the internet and what we could do. And so he built it along with some help with his dad and his dad's friend. Charged us $3,000 for the first site. And what we did is we took the ads that were in the magazines. There were 4 different regionalized versions of the magazine. And we took the ads and literally cut them apart, like with scissors, and scanned them and then uploaded them to the website as images. If you remember the old dial-up days when you had a big image, it was very often interlaced, so it would kind
Hmm.
of paint. It
Hmm.
was like that. Very few people had high-speed access. It was almost some corporations, universities would give employees that access, but very, very few people at home had high-speed access at that time. Most people were like on AOL dial-up, but you could search that site either by occupational field, so like engineering or retail, or by location, but not both. So you could pull up all the engineering ads nationwide, which there might have been 20 of them, or you could pull up all of the ads in like Illinois or Minnesota or Arizona or whatever. Um, and for a very, very early website, it actually worked pretty decently because there just weren't very many ads.
Yeah.
The first customer of the website was about 2 weeks later. Um, Office phone rings and it's a guy, and I wish I knew who it was. I could trace it back. I've looked numerous times and can't figure out who it is. But the guy had a financial services company in Texas and said, "Hey, I need to hire a bunch of like entry-level salespeople. I'd like for them to be college grads. How do I run an ad on your website?" It's like, well, that's a good question because all of the ads on the website came from the magazine, and he doesn't want an ad in the magazine. So I guess we could charge you the same for an ad that's just on the website. And the guy's like, "Sure, do you take credit cards?" So it's like, yeah, when you've got a customer who's asking to give you their money, you tend to figure out a way of making
Yeah.
that happen. So took his money, ran his ad, and that was the beginning. I mean, that was kind of like, I think we have a product here. If people are going to call us to say, "How do I give you my money?" That's a pretty good indicator that you've got something that they want.
Yeah, because back in the day, he probably searched so long to find you, right? Like the way that
Yeah,
he probably was a good half an
almost.
hour trying to figure out who you were, or even see your company name.
Yeah, almost certainly he would have gone to Yahoo,
Hmm.
and typed in something like, jobs for students, or
Hmm.
something along those lines. Yahoo actually may not even have had keyword searching back then. It might have just been a directory where you just had to like click, 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 and eventually you get to the site you wanted. Keyword searching did not come to Yahoo right away. It might have been around that time though.
And so originally, what was your revenue source? Just you were planning just for ads?
Yeah, so originally with the website itself, what became collegerecruiter.com, the website itself was the sizzle that would help sell the steak being the magazine. So
Mm,
if you were an employer and you ran an ad in the magazine, then you also got the same ad at no extra cost on the website. And so
okay.
it was cool, it was sexy. And in 1996 and 97, the first year that we had the website, almost none of our customers, the employers that advertised their jobs, almost none of them had email. They had email maybe internally, like my wife worked for what was Norwest Bank, became Wells Fargo, and she had email internally. She could send emails to other Wells Fargo employees, but not externally, and that was really, really common in that era. So what we did is candidates would come to website, find the job, engineering job with XYZ company. We had a form that they would fill in, name, phone, email, paste your resume here. They'd hit submit. Those would come to our office via email, and we would print those out each morning. That we'd print out the previous day's applications each morning and then fax them to the employers. And so when it went early on, if they were 10 applications a day, 20 applications a day, no problem. And we had a part-time guy who came in and that was his job. When it became hundreds a day, that was clearly a problem. And the growth was there. I mean, and it was probably increasing, I don't know, 5 or 10% per average day. I mean, it was quickly going up. So we knew we had a scaling issue. So what we did is there was a company called Juno, which provided free email services, almost like today's Gmail or Hotmail or
Okay.
one of those services. So we went, contacted Juno, explained the situation, and they mailed us a box of, I think it was 1,000 discs. So do you remember the days where you would get discs in the mail from
Hmm.
AOL? It was
Hmm.
that kind of era. So we got all these Juno discs. And as companies signed up with us, if they did not have an email address, resumes at or cindy.smith at XYZ Corp, but if they didn't have an external email, we would send them a Juno disk. Typically, they would install it on their home computer,
Hmm.
give us the email address that they selected, and instead of the application coming to our office for us to then print and fax, instead the application went to their Juno email address. So it got the employer the applications a lot faster, like at least a day faster,
Hmm.
and saved us a ton of staff time.
Yeah. And ultimately money too, if you're mailing out things too.
Yeah, yeah. And the yeah, I don't think we were mailing like postal mailing applications. There may have been a few of them here and there. I mean, I suppose there might have been like a small company that didn't have a fax machine or something along those lines, or their fax machine was broken, which was definitely a thing. But it was a lot. It was a lot of labor. I mean,
Hmm.
the guy who was by the end, he was working pretty much full time, just printing and faxing these applications. There was also software that I think we started to use where you didn't have to literally print and fax. You could electronically fax. I think it was like eFax or a service like that. So, I mean, it sounds ridiculous now. But for a small business at the time, it was kind of cutting edge, as bizarre as that sounds.
No, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And so then so really, if you look at this, you said what, 92, so the 3 decades you've been at this, right? So so um you've had to adapt as much to technology as the market, right? So the two almost
Yeah.
runs semi-parallel or parallel with you as you figure out, okay, what technology is available, and also when is it prudent to invest in it, right? Because we all
Oh,
have
right.
flat screen TVs now, but only a few of us paid $10,000 for them, and I wasn't one of those, right? Um, so then you had to figure out when to invest when investing in the right technology made sense and to help grow the business or offer additional services. So what was sort of the next level of or where you went from that then?
Yeah. So the first version of the website went live in 96. The second version was 1998.
Okay.
And what we did in 1998 was there was a company called Boxwood Technologies, and their business was to provide job board software on not what we would now call a SaaS, software as a service
Hmm.
basis. So they hosted a whole bunch of different job boards, mostly associations, like the American Marketing Association was one of their clients. If you remember a site called collegegrad.com,
Hmm.
they were a client as was collegerecruiter.com. And the software, the search the resume bank, the job posting software, all of that was owned by Boxwood, and they served each site separately. And so College Grad had its own job postings and resumes. We had our own job postings and resumes. That was in 1998. So that relieved a huge technical problem. We didn't have to, candidates could now keyword search. They could do things like engineering jobs in Texas, and drill down. They could search by metro area, probably by salary. I don't remember, but it was pretty darn good. The problem that we ran into within a couple of years was that our traffic was growing so much and the number of candidates who were registering was growing so much that we were creating kind of a bottleneck problem for Boxwood. So John Bell, who was the owner, I can still remember the call. Great guy, so professional. And he called me up and he's like, we have a problem. Our database is able to handle, and I think he said 1.5 million resumes in total across all of the sites that they power. College Recruiter had something like 800,000, and I think we were adding something like 25,000 a month. So I think within a year, it was something like that. Just College Recruiter was going to max out his database, and he had all these other clients to care about too. So he's basically said, we would like to terminate the contract early. It's going to cost me, John, $1 million to like rebuild. And it's not worth it. Like how much money we're getting from College Recruiter, it'll never make financial sense to do that. So as soon as you find an alternative, we will make it really easy for you to leave. And it was all very professional, very good terms. John and I we still interact, and he's a great guy. He's with JobSync now. So we ended up looking around, and we were just about to sign a contract with one company when I got a call from a guy named Steve Kraut. Steve was doing business development for what was then Artemis HR, which became Beyond.com, which became Next. And Steve calls me up and he's like, hey, a little birdie told me that you're looking to move your website from Boxwood. We should host it for you. So I had a discussion with him and a couple of other people, one of which was Rich Milgram, who's still the CEO and owner of Next. Rich, I later found out, was laying in a hammock in his backyard. Which if that's not like a tech founder's perfect place to take a phone call, I can't imagine what is.
And for the record, we both just came in from our backyards from our hammock to take this call.
There's no proof of that, but anyway, so we ended up signing with what is now Next, and then they did for us kind of what Boxwood did. They hosted our site, a whole bunch of others. When we joined them, they were hosting something like 68, 69, 70 different sites in different verticals, accounting, finance, so on and so forth. We were the college and university site. And we left them a few years later because, again, we had outgrown the offering. And we just kept wanting to do more and more and more and more customization. So, when you're starting off and you've got somebody else hosting or providing a key part of your business offerings, it's usually lower cost, and you can focus on what really matters to your customers and not all the backroom stuff that tends not to matter that much, but it really reduces your flexibility. Like if you're using off-the-shelf accounting software like we do, great, but it reduces how you what the forms might look like, or how you send out the things, or how you reconcile, or whatever. And it's the same thing with job board software, just about anything else. So we were doing more and more and more customization. And what Next wanted to do was less and less and less. They wanted to standardize, which made total sense for their business. We wanted to customize, which made total sense for our business. So it was kind of like every day that went by, their business model and our business model were diverging more and more. We became convinced, both them and us, we were better apart than we were together. So we left them. Again, they were gracious, professional. We parted on good terms. It was difficult because there was a lot of tech work. I mean, things were very intertwined, but it all worked. We ended up buying off the shelf job board software. So we owned the code and we could customize it. But it gave us like this 6 to 12 month running start because we already had all the code. We didn't have to hire somebody to build it.
Mm,
It really reduced our risk because we knew it worked. You know, you can enter into a tech project and say it's going to take 6 to 12 months, and you can get to the end of the 6 to 12 months and the thing doesn't work.
yeah.
And that can be a major problem. But in this case, we knew it worked. And so we ran with that for a few years, outgrew that. And then we built our own from the ground up. Our development team then, while we were still on that other software package, then we built it our own from the ground up. And we've done a few versions since then. So
So what
it's
functionalities and stuff have happened? So like, or from a
mm,
recruiter standpoint, like how are they, what is their interaction, like now versus what it would have been back then?
yeah, you know, we're a bit of an outlier. So our business is what we call early careers, 0 to 5 years of experience. Now we're global. We don't and won't do business in your sort of countries that you might expect: North Korea, Syria, Russia, etc. Um, but otherwise, we're basically global. We have more than 1 million students and recent grads using our site a month, looking for part-time, seasonal internship and early career jobs. What's really different about us, what makes us an outlier, though, isn't just the piece that we're our aspect that we're a niche site, that we target a particular demographic, but it's how we run ads, where we get them from, how we run them. So most job boards, virtually every job board, if you're a recruiter, you can go to the job board, create an account, pull out a credit card, pay $100, $300, whatever, and post a job usually for 30 days. And you get
Mm,
what you get. That's what's called a traditional duration basis. It's what some people will call post and pray. You post the job, maybe you get great results and you hire 12 people or the person you need, and maybe you get nothing. Maybe you get tons of great applications and the hiring manager says, nope, I'm going to hire my niece. And maybe you don't, but the risk is all on the employer. What we did probably about 7 or 8 years ago now is that we migrated almost all of our employer customers to cost per click or cost per application.
mm,
And because of that, what we found was that almost all of our customers, the advertisers, were Fortune 1000 companies or government agencies. And we started to realize that the only, or not only, but overwhelmingly, the customers that were posting single jobs, $100 for 30 days, they were almost all very small organizations, and probably half of them were scammers. That they
mm.
were just actually, they weren't actual employers. They were people trying to test, does this credit card actually work?
Oh
And if this
my.
credit card works, I'm going to go to Walmart with it and try to buy a whole bunch of stuff before it's reported and is turned off. So literally about half of our transactions on those small purchases were fraudulent, and we were catching them, but it was costing us a lot in terms of the staff time. It kind of reminded me of that part-time guy who would print off and fax resumes. It's like, here we are again. This is a scaling problem. So what we ended up doing several years ago is we stopped selling single postings. So you as a recruiter cannot come to College Recruiter and create an account. You cannot buy a single posting. Now we basically only sell to larger organizations. If you're not, if you don't have a hiring need that is going to cost thousands of dollars a month in clicks, applications, we have a small number of duration-based customers still, mostly government. But if you're not going to be advertising to that scale, then we're just not a good fit. And then you
Yeah.
should go to any of 150,000 other sites to just post that single job. So there's no resume searching, there's no profile viewing, any of that kind of stuff. So our customers overwhelmingly are Fortune 1000 companies and government agencies in the US and again, just about anywhere else globally. Canada is our third largest market. The UK is number two.
Hmm, interesting. And so along that process, right, was there, okay, so I know you have a sense of humor, right? So was there something that you did
Yeah.
or that you didn't do that you wish you either had or hadn't?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. So I think it was 2014 or 2015, so call it a decade ago, when we were building a previous version of our site, and we were really ramping up in terms of the number of people that we were hiring to work for us, developers, salespeople, etc. Um, what we should have done then is raised a bunch of money.
Mm,
When I started the business in 91, 92, when we went online in 96, there just wasn't venture money like there is now, seed money available. Now it's like if you've got a good idea, your business plan makes sense, and there's something about your background, you've got a wealthy uncle or you went to Stanford or something like that, it's pretty easy to raise investment money. Now,
mhm.
maybe 1 out of 20 of those companies will actually succeed. And the investors are okay with that because, if they put in $1 million into 20 companies and one of them becomes worth $100 million and the rest fail, that's still an awesome rate of
Yeah,
return.
good
What we
deal, yeah.
should have done is raised money in that 2014 time period, because what ended up happening is that the that version of the website ended up taking us about twice as long as we thought it would to
Mhm.
build it, and therefore costing us about twice as much money. And that created a real financial pinch for us for years.
Yeah, and
And
they were throwing money into HR back
oh,
then too, so you
yeah.
totally could have done it. And you could have bought a matching hammock for your wife too, so you both could like hang out. So
or a queen sized one that we could both fit on
yeah,
together.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
single hammock is cozy. And I probably like that better than she does.
It's so yeah, so that's just an everyday business, welcome to running the business, right? What are your
Yeah.
when
And I
can you
think
get to market
you've
faster and
probably you probably would agree with this, David. It's like the number one reason that small businesses fail is a lack of capital.
mhm,
It's not through a lack of idea. People who have never started their own business always think all I need to do to start a new business is just have an idea. It's like that's the easiest part of running a business. Executing it is way harder than just coming up with an idea. And the hardest part of executing is the financial piece. It's having more than enough money in the bank so that you can really do what you need to do for your customers, and not have to worry about, are we going to run out of cash before we get there?
yeah, that's a problem that every entrepreneur's had and the sooner that you can get over that hump, then the faster you can get on to to ultimately where you want to go. But like I know for me personally, I had stuck on that hump for way too long,
Mm,
and it was and it was just a very painful process because I just had the vision and I just could not get there, right?
yeah.
It's a such a frustrating issue.
But that
And
all worked out as soon as you moved to Albuquerque and came up with this new formulation for crystal meth with that was blue.
yeah,
And you partnered up with a guy that ran a chicken restaurant. I mean, it's just it all worked out after that.
yeah, I don't mind buses. It's okay. Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. And who knew you could just make money so easy, right? So, but that's and then so lessons learned, right, is that you can't look back. But good thing you're young enough that that you could still get to where you wanted to be, in time. It just takes you a little bit longer, right?
Yeah, and I think any business, especially one, like the one that I founded, man, almost 33 years ago, when you're around that long, you're going to have your successes and you're going to have your failures. You're going to have those great days and you're going to have the days like, why the hell did I ever start a business? And I think that's the case whether it's a small, you know, one man recruiting shop or an organization, that, an Nvidia, an Apple, whatever. You're going to perseverance, bullheadedness, hopefully a bit of a sense of humor, will get you through those bad days and the good days. And hopefully there'll be more of the good days than there are the bad days. That's certainly been the case for us.
Yeah, I totally. And but I don't want to rub anything and salt into any wounds or anything, but you do realize that if you would have stayed in the law thing with the government, you'd probably be retired with full pension by now. Right?
That thought has occurred to me.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah. Who thought being a mailman could have been so good,
Yeah,
right? When you're,
what you're saying is absolutely true, though, right? I mean, the people who take a more conservative route, not politically, but just lack of risks. I think more times than not, it ends up working out better in terms of leading a lower stress lifestyle, probably being able to retire or cut back or whatever earlier. Um, Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. Um, and you probably know this expression that the definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who would rather work 80 hours a week for themselves than 40 hours a week for someone else.
Mhm.
And I'm sure if I had stayed in law, um, probably on balance, on an average year, I probably would have made more money. I would have retired with no equity in a
Mhm.
business, like you retire and you're done. Maybe there would have been a pension or something like that there. Um, but I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of the things that I've done in my life. Like we've been able to do things like travel a lot. We've
Yeah.
been able to take our kids, all of whom are grown now, and show them a lifestyle and a world that we wouldn't have been able to do if I was working as a lawyer in the court system or wherever my path would have taken me. One of my best friends actually just retired. I'm 58, so is he. He just retired, and he never had the opportunity to take a month and go and work someplace. My wife and I call it working remotely from working remotely. He
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
do that. But on the other hand, he I don't think he would trade the life that he's had, his first 58 years, for the life that I've had, nor would I trade mine for his. So everybody's different.
Yeah, there is something to that. Like the amount of times that, I've been fortunate enough that, I've been sitting on a picnic table somewhere, wherever, and I throw up my laptop and, do whatever I need to do, and it just wouldn't be possible in an awful lot of careers that exist. So yeah, there is some perks. But
Yeah.
there's also a lot of Saturdays and Sundays that, I wake up at 7 and put my computer away at 10 at night. So
Yes. Yeah. It it,
yeah.
it 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 very much is that double-edged sword. If you have a 9 to 5 job, um, you're right. You can't do the picnic table thing. You can't go and last year at this time we were in Montreal and rented an Airbnb for a month in Little Italy, and business carried on just fine. But at the end of the day, we could walk out and be in like wonderful Montreal. The year before, we were in Quebec City, and other years we've been in New Mexico. You can't do that if you're working in a place that everybody has to come into the office even 3 days a week. You just can't.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, absolutely. If you're in a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job, you're not going to have that client who's going to contact you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday and say, I need this 25-hour project by 9 a.m. on Monday, or else I'm going to find a new vendor.
Hmm.
That's just, that's just not a thing for people in that. So, yeah, I mean, for your listeners who are like fed up with the corporate life and thinking about going and starting their own business, if you've got the right mindset, if you've got the right capitalization, go for it. But it's you're trading one set of problems for another. You're trading one set of joys for another.
Yeah, and you miss things that you never thought that you would miss from being in the corporate world. When I was vice president of sales over at HR.com, I
Mhm.
had a lady, she was 67 years old, who was my administrative assistant or EA or whatever, shorthand, did everything, and I can't tell you, I'd be on the phone and she'd come over with contracts and just say, sign here, sign there, and it was always done perfect, right?
Yeah.
And then when I started my own, I had to do these things myself. And it's like, man, this is really sucks. Like, this is a pain. I gotta do these contracts and I gotta send this off and do these and gather these and store these. What is this all about? Like
No
all
matter,
things that,
yeah, no matter how much you appreciated her when you worked with her, you probably appreciated her 100 times as much when you weren't working with her.
oh, totally. Yeah, I just never thought I would be so lost. Right? Somebody that keep me so organized. Yeah. She'd be the type of person, I swear, if I went to a trade show, she'd put a water bottle, halfway down the bag, knowing that I would probably need it at that time, right? Just a total, just a wonderful lady. Yeah.
I want her phone number and email address, and is she available to start on Monday?
Yeah, she's 76 now, so yeah, but she'd probably still figure out a way to help you out or at least make you something good to eat. Um, and so what of like where do you think like the state or recruiting's at in general? Sorry to
Mm,
get you. I know at the top of the hour you got to roll. So where do you think it's going to go in the short term, or do you see technology playing a different role?
yeah. Well, short term, um, the labor market and recruiting is very different in different sectors, like in different occupational fields within the same market. It varies dramatically, and it varies dramatically market to market. What you see in the UK right now is really different than what you see in the US, and that's
Hmm.
really different than what you see in Singapore. Um, what you see in retail is really different than what you see in engineering. Generally, it's not nearly as strong for candidates as it was 2 years ago at this time, right? Coming out of COVID, the labor market in 2022 was red hot. And I doubt that I'm going to ever see a labor market like that again during my working life. Maybe after I'm retired, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever. Um, one of the reasons that it's really different is, like you were saying, the technology, that employers are doing a lot more with a lot less. They're getting a lot more work done with a lot less people. And it's hard to find an employer of any size now that is not directly or indirectly using AI. And,
Mm,
and if people say, oh, we're not, there may be a few employers out there, but if you're using almost any kind of software, then you're using AI. And that includes just Gmail. Like when you go into Gmail for years now, when you've been typing an email and it kind of basically suggests, is this the
yeah.
word that you're typing? That's AI. Um, so, are employers using AI to assist them with recruiting? Virtually all of them are, to one degree or another. There's a lawsuit that is going to really drive up a lot of decisions for a lot of employers and tech providers in the US, Mobley versus Workday. So, Workday is, call it the world's biggest, most popular ATS, human capital management product. The ATS is a big part of that. Almost every large organization, or not maybe almost every, but most large organizations are Workday customers. And they're the ones that hire the most people, employ the most people, I should say. Mobley is a black man who applied to a couple of hundred jobs with different employers through Workday and kept getting rejected in ways that he felt humans wouldn't do. 30
Mhm.
seconds after he applied, 2 in the morning, things like that. And so he sued, became a class action lawsuit, and Workday kind of got pulled into this because Workday was doing what the plaintiffs allege and what the US Equal Employment Opportunities Commission says was screening and selection. It's the same thing that a staffing company would do, or as our friends in the UK would call them, agencies. And if you're ranking candidates, if you're matching resumes to against job opportunities, then there's some screening going on there. And that traditionally is the function of the employer. If the employer essentially outsources that to a staffing agency or to their software provider, Workday, the argument is the software provider is an agent, is working on behalf of the employer, and therefore is just as liable as the employer is if the employer discriminates against those candidates illegally. And the employer is liable if the software company or the staffing company does something illegal. Well, if Mobley wins, then I don't see how tech providers like a Workday continue to provide screening and selection software like we are now. And what I mean by what we are now, overwhelmingly, the tech providers that are providing this are doing it in a really black box way. They can't tell even themselves why one candidate ranked higher than another. They can guess and they can say, well, it stands to reason, but that's not legally sufficient. They have to
Mhm.
be able to say it was that job that this candidate had versus that job that that candidate had, or that degree, or the job title. They have to be very specific and be able to prove it, not just guess at it. Just like an employer, if you're a 63-year-old Black woman and you get rejected from a job and you allege discrimination, a recruiter could look at your resume and say, well, you don't have an engineering degree. That's why we didn't hire you, right? AI, the way most tech providers have built it, can't do that. There's no paper
No.
trail. And that's a real problem. So if this Mobley suit, if it wins, I think it puts a lot of power back in the hands of humans. If Mobley loses, I think that candidates are going to be getting rejected and never know why, nor will the recruiters know why. If you get 200 people applying to a job and the recruiter only looks at 50 of those, isn't the computer actually rejecting the other 150? If the person never looks at the 150 and they all get rejected, effectively the software is rejecting those 150 people. Um,
Yeah. I wouldn't be
it's a
surprised if they actually spit out an explanation to why you got rejected, and then, if you feel this is an accurate appeal here or something, right? Like,
Yeah, if the software company can do it, it may not be technically possible because it's not, in the old days when you and I were a lot younger, our hairlines were better, whatever, computer algorithms were basically if this, then that.
that's right.
And so you could trace it back and you could say, Dave did not have an engineering degree, therefore he was rejected. And in like typical ATS knockout questions, right? Are you allowed to work in this country?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
have this many years of experience? Those sorts of things, they're knockouts. That's easy to trace back and say, well, you're awesome, but you're a citizen of Bangladesh, not of Canada. You're applying to a job in Canada. You're not allowed to work in Canada, therefore we're rejecting you. Nothing wrong with that. That's legally defensible. But what if you don't really know? What if somebody applies and on the surface they seem to be qualified, but they weren't ranked as a good match? That's the real problem that I see with the technology right now. It's very uncertain what's legal and what's not legal.
Well, I would think that the technology providers would want to make sure that they nail that down anyway, because you never want a good candidate, slide away from you.
I agree, except that there is this belief mostly in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco, that move fast and break things.
Yeah.
And there's this, it reminds me of one of my grandmothers when she would be driving her car, and she would have her hands like way up over her head on the steering wheel because she was so short. She was oblivious to the carnage that she was creating behind her. Like, cars like zooming off the street and accident after accident, and just puppies being killed and whatever. I mean, she had no idea. And that's what a lot of San Francisco tech companies are like. It's
Yeah.
like, we're going to come out with this product, and if it creates carnage, that's not really our fault. It's not really
Yeah.
our problem. And as long as those companies kind of continue to dominate our industry as well as others, I think we're going to continue to have that. You have investors, VCs who are like, well, I put $1 million in, and if we're sued out of existence, all I've lost is $1 million. I only care if I hit gold 1 out of 20 times.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
executives walk away and the line people walk away. But in the meantime, millions of candidates are left with the burden of being improperly rejected. And so the victims here are not the people who have the ownership to the product. The victims are the ones who are just forced to use the product when they're applying to work for our organizations. So I really hope it gets fixed. I really hope that there's a good paper trail. And I do think that most recruiters would welcome that. They would
Yeah.
want to know, why no to Cindy? Why yes to Fred?
Mhm.
And right now, the reality is they're just left guessing. And I got to think there are a whole lot of recruiters and a whole lot of companies right now who are very uncomfortable with, they don't know what they don't know. They know that they're
Well,
looking at 50 applications. They think they're the right ones, but they don't know that. And I think that makes the better ones very uncomfortable.
well, we might want, based on the fact that you're a lawyer, and we might want to circle back when that ruling comes out, and have a little chat just on how that happens. But
Deal.
so I know you got a roll, but
Cool.
I'm gonna set you up here. So, um, college students should do what? Senior college
Come
students should do what?
Yeah, 0 to 5 years of experience just about anywhere globally. Go to collegerecruiter.com. Type in your major, job title, whatever kind of keywords, and your desired locations. Um, you'll get back a list of matching positions, and then have a look and apply to those of interest.
Cool. And again, if you're a major employer, I know you touched on this, a major employer, then you should look out or look to collegerecruiter.com if you're looking for those folks that have 1 to 5 years experience. Okay. Thank you, Stephen.
Cheers, Dave.
We'll
Good to
talk soon.
reconnect with you.
All right. Good speaking with you.